Hey everybody, Mike Hartman here, Ohio Bigfoot Research and Investigation Center, and Ohio Bigfoot Outdoors, Ohio Bigfoot Project, Ohio Bigfoot Podcast, OhioBigfootProject.com, whatever. Anyways, you're about to see a video that for 20 years I've been working on a system that I use when I go bow hunting or fishing or trapping, and I've started to use the same system for Bigfoot research. I'm going to share that system with you now. What you're about to see is simply the opinion of me. Strictly my opinion. I have to approach the idea of Bigfoot as that of a wild animal, not something special that has any type of third dimensional travel powers or anything else. Just a flesh and blood animal, nothing special about it. That's my approach. That approach comes from my background in wildlife management and wildlife biology. It's how I approach wildlife. It's how I approach Bigfoot. To me, Bigfoot's a wild animal. Won't convince me otherwise, don't even try. So as I said, this video that you're about to see is simply my opinion on things that I've gathered over the years. So you're going to want a pen and paper. Probably want to pause this now and go get a pen and paper. And I hope you enjoy. The 3 P's started for me at a very young age. My first love in life was fishing. By the time I was 8 years old, most kids were getting up and watching Saturday morning cartoons. I was watching fishing shows. I was watching Bill Dance Outdoors, Babe Winkleman Outdoors, The End Fisherman TV. I was watching fishing shows. And they always talked about water depth, water clarity, lure selection, color of lure, water temperature, structure. And it resonated with me, but I didn't know why. So the 3 P's were born for me in fishing, learning about water depth, water clarity, water temperature, what time of year most fish are active over other times of year, and so on. Later in life, this got transformed into and converted over to my deer hunting, my bow hunting. And then I used it again for turkey hunting. Then I used it for trapping. And it's a system that works no matter what. It works with any species, including your household pets, and even finding a pattern on human activity as a general or on a specific individual. The 3 P's are probability, percentages, and patterns. Now, probability is what you think is probably going to happen. Probability is what actually happens. So it's a gut instinct versus what actually happens. For instance, if I were to go fishing in a 5-gallon bucket, there's a probability that I'm not going to catch any fish. However, if I go down to the stream and I throw the correct lure for that stream, the probability is then much higher that I'm going to catch an actual fish. Now, when probability starts happening more often, then it goes into the realm of patterns or percentages. Now, percentages can be low and become a pattern. Percentages can be high and become a pattern. But once that pattern has evolved, once those percentages level out, then you have a pattern. Now, percentages change constantly. I took over 1,000 sighting reports and I laid them all out. What I did was I looked for things in common, commonalities. And once I found those commonalities, I started separating those sighting reports into groups. Now, I started with sighting reports as far back as I could go, till present. And I added my own sighting reports and my own investigation notes to go along with this. But once I started finding coincidences, then those papers were stacked together based on the coincidence, based on the singular event that happened. Now, the 3 P's work with each other. They very rarely work against each other, much like the uniformity of a triangle. Revolving around the 3 P's are the 4 cornerstones that make up habitat: food, water, shelter, and mating. These are the 4 driving forces for all wildlife. Sometimes they're more in search of water. Sometimes they're more in search of food. Sometimes they're more sheltered. And sometimes they are actively looking for mates. But these are the 4 corners that an area has to possess in order for it to be a sustainable habitat for an animal. These 4 things make up habitat: food, water, shelter, mating. If an area has water and shelter, but no food, an animal will not stay there. If an area has food and water, but no shelter, or mates, then an animal will not stay there. Now, mating is the least important. Food, water, and shelter are the big 3. However, in order for all wildlife species to survive, at some point, they have to mate, they have to breed, they have to sustain their numbers in order for there to be a population. So these 4 things absolutely have to happen and have to be present in order for an area to be considered a sustainable habitat. We are going to circle back to habitat and the 4 cornerstones. First, we're going to tackle just the 3 P's. And And as I said, I have spent over 20 years working on this system, probably closer to 30 years. This system is ever evolving. However, I have decided to utilize it for my Bigfoot research. And this is where you're going to want the pen and paper. And as I said, the opinions expressed in this video are simply those of my own, Mike Hartman, the Ohio Bigfoot Project, Ohio Bigfoot Research and Investigation Center. And now we're going to dive into the 3 Ps. These are the numbers compiled from daytime sighting reports. 0 to 30 yards, 45%, meaning 45% of all daytime sightings occur from 0 to 30 yards. 30% of those sightings occurred from 30 to 60 yards, and 25% of those sightings happened between 60 and 100 yards. The average 75% of daytime sightings lasted between 0 and 15 seconds. 20% happened between 15 and 30 seconds long, and only 5% were over 30 seconds long to a minute. And only 10% of all those daytime sightings did the creature, the animal, the Bigfoot, make some type of vocalization or knock. Now here we have night sightings and incidences, which you notice the numbers are much different. 70% of all night sightings happen at a distance of 0 to 30 yards, which just makes sense because you can't see that far at night. 25% happened at 30 to 60 yards, and generally it involved a vehicle driving down the road and headlights. And then 5% of all night sightings occurred between 60 and 100 yards, and most were reported under a full moon. The average nighttime sightings, 25%, lasted 0 to 15 seconds. 35% lasted 15 to 60 seconds. 40% lasted from 30 to 60 seconds. And then 85% of all night sightings, the animal made some type of vocalization, wood knock, rock clack, something like that. Now, when I say the sightings, I'm including the entire incident. So it might not have been the actual visual sighting, but they might have heard rock clacking, and then, boom, there was a flash of something. But what it means is that at nighttime, the animal felt comfortable enough to stick around for a lengthier amount of time. Now here we have the moon phase. Only 10% of sightings happened under a full moon. 15% of sightings happened under 3/4 of a moon. 30% of sightings happened under half a moon. 45% of sightings happened at a quarter moon. Now, the problem with the quarter and the 3/4 is that most records don't show if the moon was waning or waxing. So it could be 3/4 and 1/4 are both at 45%. However, we know for a fact, or at least I do, that 65% of all sightings happened with no moon at all, which from a wildlife standpoint more than makes sense to me. And I could go into the detail, but I'm trying to keep this video relatively short. But it makes perfect sense that on the darkest nights there was the most activity. Now we're going to look at seasonal incidents, which is a false positive. 40% of all sightings and incidences were reported in the spring, 75% in the summer, 40% in the fall, 25% in the winter. Now, in a sense, that holds water, which I'll explain later when I get back to the four corners. But for right now, in the winter, there are less people in the woods. Yes, there's deer hunters, squirrel hunters, but there's not hikers, campers, picnickers, photographers, people like that on blistery cold days in the woods. Summertime, you have camping, hiking, fishing. You have guys in boats. You have much more people, many more people in the woods over summer compared to winter. The 24-hour day, 20% of all those sightings and incidences that I went over happened at dawn. 10% happened at midday or daytime. 30% happened at dusk. And then 40% of them occurred at nighttime. So, out of 1,000 reports, probably 1,000 plus, 40% of all incidences and sightings occurred at night, 30% at dusk, 10% daytime, and 20% at dawn. Okay, so now here I have some explaining to do, because obviously these numbers are way over 100%. But this is based on weather. During a cool fog, particularly a cool fog morning, you are 35% more likely to have a sighting or incident. During a light, misty rain, you are 30% more likely to have a sighting or incident. During a storm, that drops to where you are only 15% more likely to have a sighting or incident. On a hot and humid day, you are only 10% more likely to have a sighting or incident. During a storm front, which again, from a wildlife perspective, makes absolute sense to me, you are 65% more likely to have a sighting or incident. All wildlife is the most active before a storm. After a storm, you are 45% more likely to have a sighting or an incident. Okay, again in this slide, all of the numbers are definitely don't add up equally to 100%. But this is the majority of probabilities. This is simply based on 1P. And that's that 70% of all prints are found near water. Now, water, of course, means soft ground. Therefore, the ground is more likely to be able to accept a footprint and keep it stored compared to dry, hard ground. 90% of all ridge tops have a well-worn wildlife trail or path right down the spine of them. Now, generally, ridge tops are much, much drier, and they don't show prints or as much evidence, but they show the paths of use. And 65% of all sightings that I went through, the animal retreated uphill. And 60% of those incidences, the animal approached from uphill. And 70% of all tree structures are found on a hillside. Not the very top, not the very bottom, but on the hillside. So, this concludes part 1 of this video. Part 2 will be coming soon, where we get into the 4 corners: food, water, shelter, and mating that make up habitat. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, my name is Mike Hartman. The opinions of this video are strictly those of my own. My theories based upon evidence that I've researched, and I hope you have enjoyed.